We will have this exciting brown bag talk on a new project and the recent field season of it. The title is Slag and Mag on the Silk Road 2025 field season at Tugunbulak.
Tugunbulak.
Tugunbulak. Okay, what they said. Today we're joined by Shelby Medina, grad student in anthropology, Nico Tripcevich, associate director of the ARF, Leah Packard-Grams, grad student in Asian history and Mediterranean archaeology, Sanjyot Mehendale, lecturer in Central Asian archaeology, chair of the Tang Center for Silk Road Studies, vice chair of the Numata Center for Buddhist Studies, and Center for Middle Eastern Studies, senior research scholar, and also faculty affiliate member of the Ancient History Mediterranean Archaeology graduate group. And then we're also joined virtually by Michael Frachetti, Washington University at St. Louis. These presenters are part of the team working at Tugunbulak, Uzbekistan. The Berkeley archaeologists joined the 2025 season, led by Washington University in St. Louis and the National Center of Archaeology in Uzbekistan, to assist in the excavations and to conduct a gradiometer survey in undefined areas of the site previously identified in a UAV LiDAR survey. So please help me welcome our speakers for this exciting talk today.
Whoa, that's very dark.
Yeah,
this is better.
Is that all right? Can we still see?
Can you see? Everybody can see? All right, thank you for that nice introduction. I was going to introduce myself, so I don't need to do that anymore. So I'm just going to explain what my job is today. I'm just going to take roughly 10 minutes to give you some background on the project. I've spoken about this project before, but perhaps there are a few among the audience who have not heard about the project yet. The Shrubs project, the Silk Road Hubs project, has completed its second full season of excavation. We started in summer of 2024 and returned in June and July 2025. And some of our students and team members will talk about this season. But for me to give you a little bit of information about the project. So the site of Tugunbulak, the site we're focusing on, is located in the high mountain areas of eastern Uzbekistan, roughly at an elevation of 2,000 meters. So this is an area very conducive to mobile pastoralism. It's not very useful to conduct large-scale agriculture in this space. However, given the size of the city, or we think that the size of the city would have accommodated perhaps some rudimentary cultivation of crops in its vicinity. So the site, as many of you now know, was discovered approximately a decade ago, but Michael can correct me later on, by Michael Frachetti, by team led by Michael Frachetti, and the mic's not good? All right. Yeah, I like it. It's very strange. Michael Frachetti and Farhad Maksudov of the Institute of Archaeology in Tashkent, while they were working on the site of Tugunbulak, as you can see here on this map, the top left map. Following the discovery, the site really gained international recognition as a result of a LiDAR survey that laid bare the extent of the urban space at Tugunbulak. And that survey, the results of that survey were published in Nature in 2024. As I said, for me to just, what I want to do today is just give you some background, historical background on the site, So the earliest levels at Tugunbulak, best we can gauge, date to the 6th and 7th century CE. So if we look at the historical map of that time, this is of that era, this is the time of the Western Turkic Khaganate, which ruled the space, a Turkic polity that ruled the space between the 6th and 8th centuries CE. The Turkic Khaganate intersected with the lowland Sogdian city-states centered on the sites of Bukhara, Samarkand, and Penjikent. The Turkic Empire or the Turkic Khaganate was by no means homogeneous like the Sogdian city-states. It was probably fragmented into smaller local political power structures. Ultimately, when you go back to this map, you will see that they fragment into a Western Turk empire as well as an Eastern Turk empire. So political instability characterizes this space. In the mid-7th century, for example, you have the expansion of the Tang dynasty creating a number of Tang protectorates in this area. So to some degree, trying to figure out the political ebb and flow of this site, we have to take into considerations these broader sort of political moments. In later eras, you have the Islamicized empires taking control of this space. You have the Persianate Samanid Empire in the 9th and 10th, followed by the Turkic Karahanid Empire of the 10th to 12th century. The Karakhanids are very important for this region as well, because they were the first Turkic dynasty to convert to Islam. So there are a couple of questions that we're trying to figure out in terms of how this site was built up, or what the history of this site is. For example, some questions that we're trying to answer: was this a continuous occupation? In other words, if the site is about 120 hectares, is it all contemporaneous, or is this a site that is built up over time? Was it a site ultimately that was a patchwork of strongholds, or are we talking about 100 to 120 hectares of city space? So that is one issue that we're trying to, or one question that we're trying to answer. The other question, I just want to go to my notes here. The other question that we're trying to answer is the function of the site. Was this a large administrative center? Was this a local power base of a Turkic clan or Turkic polity? Was it a mining site, a mining city? Was it a trade center with a mixed population? Those questions we can't answer at this point. Right. So those are some of the overarching problems that we are faced with. Another important question, I think, to answer, given the elevation of the site, is whether this was a city that was continuously occupied or seasonally occupied. In other words, in harsh winters, what happened in the city, right? Did the population decline, move to lower areas? Did some of the population stay in these higher elevations or not? So that's very, very important. The other question is centers on who built this city. Right? And on the one hand, you think, well, it doesn't really matter. Let's find out what the city is about. But it matters in terms of certain existing paradigms, right? Because we tend not to associate Turkic mobile pastoralists with city building. So we have a tendency to then always look towards the lowlands, or to argue, well, okay, then it must be those Sogdians that had mountain sites that kind of contributed to the urbanization of this space, whereas we'd like to sort of take a step back and say, well, we have to really consider the possibility of the Turks being city builders as well. All right. This local sheep herder moving across the ridge on our side. And that is another question. What's the relationship between mobile pastoralism, urban life, possible rudimentary agricultural crop production in this space? So there are a lot of unknowns, things that we will take quite a few seasons to figure these out or to answer these questions. But there are a couple of things that we do know. A strong Turkic presence in the early levels, right? So the coins that we have found so far, and they're not many, but they are of the Western Turkic Khaganate. These are, very extraordinary finds, actually, because we don't have a lot of them that are found in situ. So there's this Turkic political element in this space. We don't have burials yet. We have one single burial, but it's a very interesting one, and that's a burial of it's a Turkic horse burial. So where an individual is buried with weapons and his or her horse. And that's very typical of burials in the Turkic space. Now, the LiDAR images indicate circular shapes in the landscape, circular structures. And of course, we'll have to see maybe next season whether these are perhaps Kurgan burials. We'll get some more information, perhaps on the populations of this space. Of course, in the later period, when you're thinking 10th, 11th, Karahanid eras, then the chances of finding, of course, a Muslim burials increase as well. So the Turkic component is very, very clear. And in terms of the identity of the population, there are some indicators as well. And then third, we know that the city was, that iron smelting was central to this city, at least based on the extant excavations. So this is an overview of the excavation in 2024, where we uncovered a workshop full of iron smelting furnaces, room after room, where with the production of iron, lots of slag, and these, many of these rooms have had iron furnaces, sometimes interconnected furnaces. There are a couple of interesting, if you zoom out a little and look at textual sources, there's some interesting sort of pieces of information that pop up on the one hand in Chinese sources. So in Chinese sources, that when they talk about the Turks, they associate them with iron production and metallurgy. So the two Jue are always mentioned in connection with this type of economy. And when you look at that ridge and you sort of follow some of the other sites like Muk, or look at some of the other sites like Muk, you see them also, these sites also associated with iron production, so that we know that at Tugunbulak, iron was very, very important. And then lastly, again, zooming out a little bit and looking at some other sources, when you look at the Arabic sources and Persian sources, their references to this region of Ostrushana, you will find many references to iron production. So Takhri, for example, the 10th century Persian geography, talks about the Fergana Mountains as the mountains where iron was produced. Many geographers talk about the Turks of Central Asia and this region as the region from where iron comes. And Ibn Hakal is probably the most important one in terms of the possible identification of the site, when he mentions the city of Marshmanda in Ustrushana, and his descriptions, historical descriptions of the site, correspond quite a bit with the site that we have. So now I think, and Michael can confirm this or deny this, there's a consensus of scholars that actually are happy with the identification of Tugunbulak as Marshmanda. All right, so I just, for those, I don't want to take up too much time. So just for those who didn't know much about the site. This is a bit of background. And then this year we had a very fun and interesting excavation season, and I'll leave it up to others to talk about what they did, and then later for Michael to sum up some of the results. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for giving us that historical background to contextualize this site and its amazing history. Okay, so my name is Leah. I'm a grad student here at UC Berkeley, finishing up my dissertation. And I was lucky enough to be part of the June crew for excavating the top of the tell or the tepe that we excavated last summer. So I was part of the June team. Here you can see the June team. We were so lucky to have an incredible team with people from University College London, UC Berkeley, Washington University in St. Louis, and more, et cetera, et cetera. So we had a really wonderful team that worked really well together, all dedicated to the same goal of discovering who built this city. This is a picture of camp. First, I'll just begin with some camp photos so you can sort of see what it looks like today. You will notice that there are two white yurts where we make meals. And of course, this brand new solar array, which we're very, very happy to have put in. On the other side, so if you turn around, you'll see this beautiful view. And you can see my tent right here or right there. That was home for a while, facing the other direction. Life at camp is fun, it's rugged, and we were joined by this beautiful, beautiful dig dog who had a very bad habit of chewing on our steaks. It's a scientific material, please. The food was wonderful, wonderful vegetarian food as well. So what did I do? Oh, well, first, actually, of course, we have a lot of fun photos, including me being very sad when we deconstructed a rock wall, which is necessary to get down to the lower stratigraphic layers. It is necessary. But what did I do at the site? What did we discover? Well, I learned how to dig this material called pāksa. What is pāksa? It is local compressed earthen bricks. And the first thing that we did when we got on site, when I got a tour of the site by Michael, he brought us around, looked down at the ground, picked up this broken pāksa brick, handed it to me and said, memorize this, look at this, memorize this. It's a local compressed earthen brick. So it's not quite like the mud bricks that you find elsewhere in the world. It's very compressed and it's made of local earth. It's also an interesting shape. As we were excavating these pāksa bricks, they're more squarish than the bricks that we find in Egypt, for example. The color is slightly paler than the surrounding earth. So as you're digging down, you can sort of see it start to change, but not really. It can be virtually indistinguishable from the earth and the matrix around it. What really helps identify this pāksa brick is the consistency, is the tactile feedback coming from the travel when you hit this brick. And I would describe this in many places, especially in the upper stratigraphic layers, as melted mud brick. This is something we say in Egyptian excavations. What do I mean by melted? Well, I mean years of compression and water runoff erode the bricks, and then the seams between them and the mortar, it all becomes indistinguishable. So I don't mean it actually melted. I mean it eroded such that an already compact material got even more compacted. It makes it very difficult to distinguish and to excavate. But luckily, there's hope. I learned that the flat Marshalltown, called the Margin Trowel by Marshalltown, is your friend. This is how we were able to find this brick layer and uncover it. So the pāksa was in and among this masl heaven, as you can see. There was a great diversity of soil colors. I took this photo just as a top-down view of our dump, of our backfill pile. And it was way, way, way more compact compared to excavations where I've been on Egypt. So here you can see the mud brick pāksa wall sort of starting to take form, starting to take shape as we're discovering it as we go. And you can see it a little bit in the bulk there as well. And as you can see, or maybe you're just taking my word for it, on the other side of these rocks, that earth is very, very compact, very, very different from what I've seen before in Egypt. So I was able to gain experience digging a different type of matrix, which was really, really wonderful. And I'm totally blessed to have had this experience. So how do you actually find this? Here I have an in-progress photo, but how do you actually discover it? Well, I learned that it's listening to the sound of a trowel. Is it when you tap it, is it a hollow sounding thud? Maybe. It might be ash, maybe not, but that was something that we found in this certain trench that we were working in. Is it more of a tap, tap, tap? That was pāksa. Or if it's a clink, well, that's metallic slag, or maybe a rock. Maybe you hit a rock. So obviously we found this stone wall, which you can see running through the photo here. And as soon as we started hitting on these rocks here, we stopped and we reassessed. Because there is a practice of covering stone with pāksa to make it all level, to make it all a nice, straight, even wall. So to find the seams in the earth, we have to feel where the trowel catches on the edge of a brick. And this came with practice. And this is something that I sort of termed flat troweling with the margin trowel. There was a terrifying moment where I thought, did I just break this pāksa brick? Thank goodness, no, I did not. I actually found slag on the edge of a pāksa brick using this sort of flat trowel method. And here I'll try to see if I can get this video to work. Looks like it's working. So notice how I'm using the trowel flat down and then finding for seams by dragging the trowel back and then pushing it forward and seeing where it catches. It's catching. And then along the side, I thought I broke it. I was panicked. But then I tapped it on the ground. And here I'm about to tap it on the ground. It's a thud. And then I tap it on the stone and it's hard and it's not breaking. So it's this sort of method of dragging a flat Marshalltown upside down and then having it catch on a seam, dragging it down and then pushing it back to see where it catches on the seam. All right, let's see, can I go back and view slideshow? All right. So I, Elaine, from University College London, and I had a great time learning on the job. This is archaeology, right? You learn as you go. And eventually, again, I was only there with the June team. This is a photo from later on in the excavation after I left. The blue arrows denote a place where we were digging, which is top down. Notice the difference in the color and consistency of the pāksa bricks from the blue top down to these beautiful, well-articulated, absolutely gorgeous pāksa brick that you can see with the yellow arrows. But of course, this is archaeology. We can't tunnel in from the side. You have to start from the top down, which is exactly what was so challenging. And luckily, as we were digging, we were able to stop and touch base with the magnetometry team. And this was incredible because they showed us our sector Alpha A. You can see here a pit with iron at the base. You can see the stratigraphic matrix is a totally different color than that in the surrounding areas. So that was the pit. And then we were able to see this sort of light colored whiteness, which actually turned out to be the wall. So this is the advantage of having a magnetometry team on site where we can check the laptop every night. I have fond memories of checking the laptop every night and saying, what are we digging? So thank you so much for the preview of this wall magnetometry team. And now I will hand it over to you.
Hello, guys. I'm gonna leave my notes up here so I don't look sweaty. Part of the crew that went out there, me and Nico didn't do very much to any excavation at all. Most of our time was focused heavily on the magnetometry aspect of it that Leah lovingly kind of previewed. So a quick summary of what is magnetometry. It's a little bit niche, but in short, it's a commonly used passive technique for measuring and mapping variations in the Earth's magnetic field that are caused by different magnetic properties in the soil and other subsurface kind of like material, and those and that's how we kind of delineate either features or artifacts subsurface without actually having to dig. It's just one of many. So what magnetometry is the technique, gradiometer is the actual object. So I have Nico up here showing ours that we have the ARF, the Barrington 601-2, because we have two sensors, one on each side to make survey quicker. So essentially what it's doing is it's almost like it's not a metal detector, which is just kind of one, it has like about a half-meter depth, but also it's kind of sending in pulses. What the magnetometer is kind of doing, it's using a time sampling strategy to use the sensors, both top and bottom, to gauge the strength of magnetic fields at different heights. Above ground is our top sensor, below ground is our bottom sensor. And we're subtracting that top value from the bottom value to give you like that general impact of what's being gauged directly below the sensor when it takes a reading. So as you're walking, you'll hear a cadence of beep, beep, beep. That's when we're getting a reading. So it's only taking for that one particular place. It really doesn't give us, it doesn't tell us anything about depth. It won't tell you what you're looking at. It'll just say, this is high magnetic, this is low magnetic. And it comes in like a gradient from high to low. Depending on how you visualize it, either be various colors. Ours, I just use black to white. If you see black, it means it's highly magnetic. If you see white, it means it's very low magnetism. And that's how we create our gradiometer maps. So for us, it can be used for various things, but the technique it's most useful for us is, for one, looking at features and boundaries. These are not from our site, these are examples. So if you see a high positive reading, it often means like more of a recently dug pit, because those topsoils are rich in minerals, and they're often more highly magnetic or ferrous. So ferrous means iron. If you see highly negative readings, for more buried soils, it's kind of like the intermixing, which kind of levels it out. The other one is features, particularly thermal features. So we're talking about hearths, kilns, in this case, smelters. And the biggest part of that is high temperatures convert low magnetic minerals to high magnetic minerals through something called magnetic enhancement. You superheat something, it just shifts it all permanently. So if you're in an area where there's lots of wildfire, it's a lot harder to do that kind of survey. But if you're in areas where there's hearths or kilns, you can kind of suss those out with the magnetometer ahead of time. So that's kind of what we were particularly targeting in this area, just with magnetometer alone. It's really great for looking at an overall composition of a site because it's quick, it's sturdy, it gets the job done. I can process the data in like 5 minutes, and I'll go to Michael saying, would you like the good news or the bad news? Good news is, we have a great boundary here. We've got some features. Bad news is, I have to extend my survey area because it keeps going. So for example, we did, I want to say, was it 52 hectares of runs while we were out there? 5.2 hectares? Cool. Nico's gonna talk more about that in a bit. So this is Mount A. This is the one that Leah and Sanjyot and everyone was excavating at this summer. So above it, here's the magnetometer image overlaid. You'll see a wonderful dot here. This is a great example of a dipole. When you have something super magnetic, it's gonna blow at everything around it. We thought it might be like a very significant feature. Come when we look at the ground itself, we find out it is in fact a massive piece of rebar, about 3 feet high, with massive nasty spikes coming off of it that everyone forgot about because it was a couple seasons ago, until we looked at it and we're like, wow, that blew out that entire area 4 meters in every direction. So it obscured everything. We were like, that's a great textbook example. Mind you, each of these squares is about 20 by 20 meters. So they took them 2 days to dig that back out. And then we had to go over it again, this is the new image. You can still see there's a little bit of blowout, but we got a better example of what actually is beneath their feet. So this helped them overlay some of their units. I'm hoping that they go excavate here next season because I think this is a gate and that's pretty neat. We don't know actually what it is. Again, magnetometry doesn't tell you exactly what's under there. It just tells you that there's something highly magnetic, low magnetism. It won't tell you depth. In general, magnetometers only go, like, the best ones will go 20 meters, but ours here, max is going to be about 3. And we found out ours 3 meters down. Usually it's going to be about 1 to 1.5. In this case, ours went down like 2 meters. So neat. Anyway, here's kind of the excavation units from that particular mound that they were digging in. I'm going to focus in on mostly alpha for this one. So here's a kind of zoomed in view. Sorry, I lost words. Here, Leah is pointing out here on this corner, this was that lovely wall. But here's kind of some of the overlays, some of the features that were significant that we had context for. If it's denoted in orange, it's something that was in the lower levels. Purple was in the higher levels. Again, we can't gauge depth. And this is where actual excavation comes in handy. We can tell you there's something there. This is one of the upper photos of the site. This is where the wall eventually came out, but this was that big area of iron, a pit with iron in it. There's a lot of slag chunks coming out of everything, especially this upper slag layer. This slag layer over here. This is what it ended up looking like when they got down to level. And this one's about 0.5 meter to 1 meter down. With these ones, this is that upper slag layer that I pointed out over here. Once we got down to a little bit more level, obviously this is further down elsewhere, but this is that feature when it kind of ended. And again, our dear friend slag that kept coming out, it never stopped. Eventually they had a massive mound of it, but it seemed like it was just discarded as it was. So this is one of the lower levels that came out of Mound A. They did wonderful photometric ortho maps of every layer, so it was really neat to overlay. This one is about 2 meters deep is how deep they went. This is where that lovely wall came in, a lot more evident. We have a furnace that kind of went up through all the layers, but was most evident down here. And significantly, there was a massive ceramic urn that came out of fire feature D. So this is another picture of that wall with the, here it is in its glory, along with the bordering stone wall. This is the vase I was talking about in fire feature D. It's just interesting, ash layers everywhere that you kind of see reflected in the mag. Another orientation of it, and then this is kind of it that when it came out. So it was completely shattered, but beautiful object. And this one, it says it was about 170 centimeters below datum, I think. But yeah, so going back to this image, this is our lovely furnace chimney, smack dab in the middle. We're not quite sure what it is, but it could be either. At least from my perspective. Like I said, I wasn't part of the excavation team, so I was like, oh, what'd you guys find? I just get to see the images. But yeah, so that's kind of my portion of it. I'm going to hand off to Nico real quick. I kind of blew through that. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Shelby. Yeah, so I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about the regional perspective on our gradiometer survey. So yeah, we covered over 5 hectares. It was over 120 blocks. So it was a lot of laying out these grid squares. We were previously talking about this hilltop citadel feature here with the furnaces, but we also did magnetometry on different parts of the valley. You can see over here, this is an agricultural area today. There's chickpea fields, barley fields, and we had to walk through those quite a bit. Yes, so 120 blocks, that's a lot of walking. Oop, what's this? So talking about the chickpeas a little more. So we found this, in this part of the project, there's a lot of sediments. It's quite deep. I'd never worked in an area with over 2 meters of sediments in some places. You know, it's generally 1 to 2 meters of sediment, which has its advantages and disadvantages. On the plus side, it keeps looters from really reaching anything because they have to get 2 meters down. And also when they put these roads in, they didn't really actually hit much because, you know, even if there's a meter deep sidewall, you know, cut on the road, they're still above a lot of the features. But on the other hand, it was, you know, it's relatively hard to get down to the archaeological material. And then the magnetometry was, you know, affected quite a bit by the agriculture. So like you can see these chickpea rows that we were endlessly walking through, and it looks like corduroy. So I got my jacket. It looks like corduroy in the mag, and it really made it hard to interpret. But you can see these countervailing patterns here. We also ran across this very light sediments on this raised area, which may have been a clay or kaolin source for the crucibles that were used in the furnaces. There's quite a few other patterns in the mag like these that may have been, there's a wall right here on the surface. So these might have been connected to fortifications, or they could have been water features like ditches because they're pulling in from the adjacent, they could have been pulling water from the adjacent drainage. And then there's quite a bit of hill walking too. And you can see that those are the chickpea fields in the background back there. So this is the good view of the overall agricultural area. Anyway, let me pause it. This back here, these are juniper trees. And one of the questions sort of at a landscape scale is why they were where they were. There's good winds, there's very consistent winds sort of raised above the plains there. And there's iron in the rocks on the other side of the valley. But what about the fuels for these furnaces? Well, these juniper forests are there, but they're pretty slow growing trees. So one possible interpretation is that there's sort of episodic use of the site where, you know, they wipe out the fuels and they have to move to other regions. And then perhaps a century later, there's beautiful juniper forests. So they reoccupy. One of the things we worked on quite a bit at the beginning was how to improve the laying out over 120 grid squares can really take a lot of time, and we're just like tapes everywhere, you know, using the old a squared plus b squared equals c squared method. That's a lot of taping of, you know, it ended up taking longer to lay out blocks than to walk them. Fortunately, Michael had this satellite-based correction. I can tell you more about it if anybody's interested later. But it got us down to like, you know, centimeter or two of error in the middle of Uzbekistan, monthly subscription. It's pretty amazing. So what we ended up doing was just laying out these 20 by 20 meters with stakeout where it guides you to the grid corners. And just, you know, it takes a minute or two to lay out a block this way. And then we could set up our tapes to guide us in our mag work. But yeah, so you can really see what we did is we just covered the whole valley in a UTM grid like this, and then did certain blocks, 20 by 20 meter blocks. The drawback is UTM is flat and this is very hilly. So you got to consider slope distance, not just vertical distance. And so we had to make some adjustments for that. One of the other great things about this project is it's pretty interdisciplinary. There was an archaeobotany team. Christine, I put this in here for you. There's the Dorian Fuller and Ayalin Delgado from UCL were there doing flotation from last year's excavations and collecting seeds and other materials from the plants in the valley. And then also Mark Macklin was there collecting OSL dates from, so he had a pretty interesting interpretation of the valley history with the hydrology on the different hydrology on different sides of the valley. One side was a very kind of high energy system with iron rich rocks, and it was just kind of, the water would sort of rip down this valley. And the other side, it was much slower and agricultural with lots of diversion for irrigation. So that was probably the farming zone. And you can see them cutting these OSL sampling tubes here with a battery powered hacksaw thing there. Okay, so, oh, and then Michael is going to speak to us as a wrap up. We haven't tested the audio, so maybe, Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but can they hear you? That's the question.
That's a good question.
I'm turning up the sound. Hold on.
Can you hear me now? How about a test?
I do apologize.
How about now?
Let me see if I can turn up the sound here. Yeah, wait, okay, try now.
How about now? How's that for sound?
It's still pretty quiet. Thanks, Gene. We're going to plug in some speakers. Michael.
That's fine. I'll just keep talking so you can get.
Yeah, that's good.
If you can stop sharing your screen,
Oh, yeah.
I'll share mine, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Did we give you privileges? Here.
And just so I'm clear, we have about 10 minutes till people are out of here.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure oh, and it says you need to permit me to share screen.
Co-host. Oh, Sarah.
Just go to, can you do just the share screen?
All right.
Multiple users, not the bottom.
Multiple users.
Share.
Well,
Okay.
oh,
Are we
okay.
sharing?
Oh, sorry. I think Mike. Okay, try now. I think Sarah just did. Try again, Michael.
All right. Try one more time. Share.
There's a project director, Michael Frachetti.
All right. Good. Looks like we're sharing.
Is it working? Are you speaking,
Yeah.
Michael?
Can you see every time I hit presentation mode, it's kicking me out. Can you? Oh, I know. I need to share a different. I need to share my whole screen. That's why.
Oh yeah, here we go. Headphones.
Let me just do the whole desktop. Because,
Yeah.
Well, he didn't pay the money.
Exactly, that's it.
one second. Let's clean up some things here.
This is not very loud. Okay, try again.
Except for the co-directors.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I think it's louder on the.
Nico, can you see my screen now? Yes, I can see it behind you. Okay, good. Maybe you can just put the microphone in front of whatever the speaker is on the computer.
It's fine, it's fine.
Yeah, we can.
We're all quiet.
We'll be quiet.
Go ahead.
How about now?
Yep, you're
That's
good.
just for the
Are we
recording.
good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thanks. First of all, it's super enjoyable for me to see a presentation about the site that one works on. I love the idea of our team expanding to include so many students and so many partners that there's like parallel lives to the project itself. And so it's a delightful thing for me to be in the audience for most of this. So I'll try to keep that spirit alive and not say too much. But thought I would just give you guys a couple more views of some of the overview of what we think we're going to do next year on the basis of the magnetometry, but also a little bit, just some more photographs of what the site really looks like and some of the interpretations. There was a couple different comments made throughout, with full exception of the fact, or fully accepting the fact that, for many of the team members, Nico and others, like this is their first time in Central Asia, let alone working with this time period and such. So, first of all, awesome job getting most of it right. There's a couple of things I would probably, give a slightly different view on. But again, that's what we're hoping, is that the different viewpoints bring us to different conclusions. This is a beautiful photograph taken of kind of the end of excavation. And here you can see a little bit about what our trench looked like there with a journalist from the UK, Sanjyot in yellow and Farhad in tan, as they propagandize they're going to be a whole show about the site running on Channel 4 any day now. So keep an eye out for that. And also, and the Smithsonian coming up. So there'll be a couple of interesting publicities, public articles and public scholarship that's out there for people. This is the final aerial view of the excavation, and you can really kind of see the complexity of the site from here. There's an outer wall, which is about almost 3 meters thick, 2.5 meters fortified. I have a photo next about what that fortification looks like. But these really complex multi-period, multi-layered occupations of these pāksa rooms, which are these rammed earth and mud brick, or rammed earth and rammed compressed brick buildings, upon which later stage constructions like this stone wall, that possible chimney, those were cut into and built into the previous layer. So we have multiple phases of occupation, which I won't spend much time on here, but you know, if I get a chance to speak again at Berkeley, I'll say more about that, hopefully. And you can see kind of those phases cut out in different ways. This is that fortified structure. Here's one of our 3D models where you can really see, you know, inside out the stratigraphy, but more importantly, the outer framework. I mean, it's not quite Inca stonework, but it's pretty special. I mean, some of these stones are large, you know, 3 or 4 feet in width, and you know, easily hundreds of pounds a piece. So they're definitely doing some construction here that's on the monumental scale. And this begs the question as to why and what they're doing, and you know, what's the logic behind having a fortified structure that apparently houses metallurgists. So we'll get to that question maybe again another time. Just some more views of that wall. This is that mud brick or compressed pāksa wall construction, again from our models, and you can see really nice construction styles. And we think that the architects here might have been from different cultural backgrounds, because this construction style is actually different from the construction style we documented in the other mound. So one of the big questions, as Sanjyot pointed out, is the chronology and whether or not these two mounds, the 2024 excavations and the 2025 excavations, are contemporary with one another, because it could be that they changed their building technology to accommodate something that they discovered along the way. Here you see those mud bricks in place, almost, you know, like just very well preserved. One of the collapsed, we didn't have a lot of material, although I'm going to show you as much as I can. But the material we did have was all found in a couple of different layers. And it seems as if when everything collapsed, it all came down at once. So I want to skip to some of these ceramics here pretty quickly. And you can see just this whole layer, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pottery sherds in this upper phase collapse that just littered the entire upper end of the site. This is that possible chimney feature that we were talking about. It kind of starts in a fire pit, kind of goes in, and then there seems to be a big stone tower, which of course was destroyed by erosion or by collapse, but it does seem to be somewhat intact. Furnaces, these are for metallurgy. You see more of those. So the metallurgical process of smelting and making iron blooms was something that continued throughout the entirety of the site. And again, this is that large vessel that you saw Shelby talking about in the magnetometry, which was cool to have those verifications on the ground. These are modern day cooking stands and sort of some of the comparisons of how they use these kinds of shapes in just a kitchen setting, but outdoor kitchens in this case. Okay, let's skip this because you already saw that and go to the artifacts. So here's a few of our nicer finds from this season. So some whole and near whole vessels, some spindle whorls suggesting some domestic economy, possible makeup dish or some kind of, you know, small dish for something. It didn't have any residue, so it might have been unused. This is some of the excavation materials from 2024, where we had weaponry, iron blades or steel blades, copper bowls, bells. I mean, a whole array of things that point to kind of everyday life and not so much like an elite political structure or even a military setting. These are all more domestic or production oriented vessels and materials. Some interesting things like this one is an ostraca with a Turkic ruin on the bottom. So again, fitting into that theme of who ran the site, who occupied the site, and you know who built the site. We see Turks being expressed in a variety of different cultural arrays, and there are some personal moments where you can actually see handprints in the mud brick where they were shaping their furnaces and using individualized. You can see their actual fingerprints in the material. A whole bunch of interesting material for subsidiary production, like horn, which is cut so as to be used for handles or for inlay. So horn was a big piece of the metallurgical smelting and blacksmithery in the region. So this is an indicator of that possibly. This is probably for making brick ovens. It's actually a stamp of sorts, kind of like a brick hammer. And we hammer you can use it to kind of pound out the sides of the mud brick. And then, of course, finally, just some nicer imported glazes and some things that wouldn't be local produced, but were probably imported from the lowlands. So indicating some degree of trade. Again, speaking of some coins, this is the newest coins and a carnelian bead. These are definitely indicators of longer distance trade. And again, probably one of those Western Turk coins here with this shape of a tribal tamga on the back. And tons of slag, and then tons of iron material as well. So, we did a whole series of ethnographies in previous years looking at blacksmiths and looking at the way in which iron production takes place. And I don't have time to go through it now, but I just wanted to indicate that we're kind of investigating this story really as kind of a long-term social construction, and one in which, we might be finding the source of some of the identities that that Central Asia and indeed this part of the Silk Road was known for in later centuries, starting with the Turks as much as it may have started with the Sogdians or other communities that are better known in the region. So with that, again, I'll just say thank you to everybody. It was a delight to hear everyone's presentations, and I'm happy to help answer any questions if there are any. Thanks.
Questions?
If you have iron-rich soils, how do you know that's not screwing up your magnetometry?
Yeah.
So a good portion of it was because when we calibrate it, we're calibrating it on site. So it's unless they're whatever's kind of in the general area is going to kind of be seen as like the neutral ground. So we don't test with the same calibration up in the chickpea areas as we do on the actual metallurgical areas. So we try to offset that. It is a big concern, especially in metallurgical, like an area like this, makes it mag a bit hard to do in like more modern areas where there's a lot more of that like ferrous like trash effectively. In this one, it wasn't really that big of a problem. Like we could even delineate where some of those that fortification wall that Michael was mentioning, we could see it in the magnetometer as well. It wasn't in the alpha area I was showing, but we could see it as well. So like it wasn't really a concern because we could differentiate, and the big chunks of ferrous areas were just so distinct that everything else just became neutral. But it is really.
In the iron-rich, the natural outcrops were down in the river valley below. So. Christine, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, it's kind of offside, but you mentioned that there was a team from UCL who was there to do the flotation, but I couldn't see from the picture what kind of system they were using.
Yeah.
If you can say something about their water flotation system.
Yeah. You know much about the flotation? You don't have Dorian here. Oh wait, he's silent. Michael, you're muted, Michael.
Oh my God.
Nico, do you want me to say something about the flotation system quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a simple bucket flotation. So it's not high tech. We don't have a running, filter or anything like that. It's just simple bucket systems with multi-scaled nets. Basically they use a variety of screens to pull out the different layers. We have a water source that's running, but it's probably not as efficient. And I think this team just likes using those 15-liter buckets.
No, Dorian loves that. I was hoping he wasn't still doing that. Now I know.
I can't hear anything back there.
Yeah, we were down at the river every afternoon, stream. Let's not call it that. What was wrong with me? Well, our stream, our concept water stream, they were down there. Probably, for example, the bucket system.
There are ways to do it very simply without just doing core recovery buckets, but that's just another story.
Take it up with George.
Oh, I'm certainly not gonna. Anyway, good to know that's what's going on.
There's the buckets. Any other questions?
One more if I can. Very often in areas where there's lots of mud brick, or stone walls also, they're foundation rather than being parallel next to mud brick walls. Does the stone wall that you have parallel to mud brick wall go underneath?
I don't know.
Mud brick?
Not that I'm gonna, down the
That'd be unusual to have a mud brick wall that's flat on the ground.
Yeah.
You have some real.
Yeah, no, there was that the brick covered the stone.
It's only on the outside, it's kind of massive.
There were some photos that showing you. Yeah. That one?
That's one of the walls. It's not quite.
It's adjacent.
That
I mean,
one is
they-
adjacent, and the fortification wall, yeah.
This one probably shows. See, this is all up on a raised promontory, so in terms of drainage and stuff, it wouldn't be a big issue because it pours off the. Check the chat.
I'm sure it's my closing.
They were saying they couldn't hear on Zoom if you're not talking into the long.
Oh, there we go. Chat. Do you have any advice for graduate students and early career professionals looking to gain field experience in Uzbekistan? Michael, can you hear us?
Nico, I'm having a really hard time hearing anybody.
Do you have any advice for graduate students and early career professionals looking to gain field experience in Uzbekistan?
Yeah, come to Tugunbulak. There's only a can you hear me? There's only a couple of major projects, at least from American universities in Uzbekistan right now. Ours is arguably the largest and has the most kind of like extensive like capacity for taking on new topics. Soren Stark from NYU is also excavating in the city of Bukhara. So it's another opportunity if people are interested in a more urban, like a more traditionally urban context, and digging in much more confined and hotter temperatures. Bukhara in the summer is 120 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas we're in beautiful weather in the mountains. So I don't think that's like that enticing, but the archaeology is interesting, and of course they're doing a great job. Otherwise,
That's NYU.
That's through NYU, through the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World. So you could contact Soren. And there's, I think, a couple of new projects. One that's running through Soren in the same region, but co-led by one of my former students, actually, named Linny Rouse, who's at the German Archaeological Institute. They may be taking students and such. But as I said, there aren't that many American projects in Uzbekistan, and those that are, and ours is probably of those that are, ours is probably at this point the most open and flexible.
Okay, there's another question, one from Susan Frank. What kinds of things were they making? Did they appear to be mainly farming related, or were there weapons?
No, I wanted to say something about the farming, if I may. Like, so, I mean, Nico, you had mentioned that, some of that water on the other side was used for irrigation and farming. I mean, we have no verification that there was farming going on there at all. We do have crops, like we have, imported grains and that kind of thing. But as of now, we have not identified any clear agricultural practice or anything clearly, even in the botany, that would suggest large-scale agriculture. Now, there are agricultural fields there today. They mostly grow potatoes and chickpeas, which some of those could have been grown, obviously not potatoes, but chickpeas, I suppose, could have been grown at that time. It's likely that some degree of barley could have been sown there, but it wouldn't likely have been irrigated. Barley typically doesn't get irrigated in the same way, not in a region like ours where you've got tons and tons of rainfall throughout the early parts of the season. So today, for example, barley is not irrigated. So if there's water moving into that section, which is a topic of a PhD student of mine here at WashU, we think it's probably more municipal water or other kinds of water purposes. So this is a big question, is how the water is being used, what the infrastructure does. And I don't believe the city is a heavily agricultural city. That's just based on the archaeology that we have so far. And it's a major topic that Dorian's addressing in the botany. But it, the key problem we have is that it's only a 2 or 3 month growing season. Snow doesn't melt up there until, early May in some cases. And even in May and in June, the temperatures regularly drop below freezing at night. So you get a long frost season and a very early frost season. So crops that would be growing at that elevation would have to be frost adapted and other kinds of things. So it's an interesting environmental context for agriculture. But in terms of what they were making, anything you can make out of metal, basically knives. I mean, what we found mostly at this point are knives. We have found what looks something like a sickle, or it could just be a bent knife. But a lot of knives, a lot of arrows, things like that are what we get out of the metallurgy. We think that they're probably selling the metal itself, or moving large blooms down to areas that are being processed in some other areas, or we just simply haven't found the section where they're turning the blooms into finished products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was Mark Macklin who thought a lot of those modified landscape features might have been amplifying the grazing potential.
That's another possibility as well. Yeah, I mean, I still believe that those are structural, but excavation will be now what tests, Nico and Shelby's arduous work of tracking out those huge enclosures out on the south side of the site now demand us to go and excavate there. So one of the things that we'll be doing is excavating and targeting those areas where we now have a mag picture.
Any other questions?
There's one that just came up about permanence or seasonality. I think that right now we're leaning towards annually occupied, occupied year round by some, and amplified and occupied by more in the summer. We don't really have a strong, scientific evidentiary for that, but we're working on, again, seasonality studies, both from a botanical as well as a zooarchaeological perspective. So one of the ways we can address some of that will be with the zooarchaeology, the cementum analysis and other kinds of things. But there's also things in the botany and things in the isotopes that can help us to study a bit about the seasonality. But right now it's a bit of an open question.
You guys stole my thunder about this archaeology question, seasonality. I'm looking at one of our archaeology people over here. I do have a comment, a question, an invitation. Yeah. So the comment is that since you guys are looking at a big, potentially specialist place, and particularly with folks who are going to be many times a specialist support this type of facility, right? Including those who built it. And so I was thinking about your pāksa stuff. And I was thinking about Abby Stone's work. She's one of Susan McIntosh's students working in West Africa at the fabled city of Djenné. And the kinds of stuff we were finding there with Adobe lends itself to some questions about what kinds of specialists must be engaged and supported by a pastoral society to do the work that they were doing. And so the question is, colleagues like Nico and Scott and I have written about working with ground penetrating radar and Adobe features and how to discern that Adobe lens from the brick and everything else. Yeah. The question is more like, when you're looking at the pāksa, when you're looking at the way it's built, looking at its constituent parts, looking at the way that it's manifest across the site as melt lenses and otherwise, does it have a relationship to some of the pottery and the clays that folks, because there's, also a ceramic material scientist, I'm interested. Yeah. Were they mobilizing clay sources in all of these realms of their earthen construction and earthen fabrication for things like crucibles, or were these different specialists? And I think maybe some of the petrography might lend itself to some answering some of those questions, right? Yeah. Just good old fashioned petrography. Don't try XRF. Please don't do that. Do good old fashioned petrography. And I think that might be something quite useful. Is that something you've started?
We haven't started petrography, but your point is very well taken. And I agree with you. I actually think that it's even more complex than then I have to even say it's probably even more tricky than what you described, because I do think that they're making pottery locally. So the local pottery is absolutely local. There's very little imported pottery in general. Like less than 1% of the pottery appears to be imported. It's super grotty, handmade stuff. Nothing like the material you find anywhere else nearby in lowland cities, right? So their pottery is just like fundamentally a mountain, almost like vernacular style pottery. And I think it's locally produced with local clays and local, materials. And I think that's one thing. I also think the pāksa and the mud brick is locally sourced in terms of the actual raw materials. But I think the specialization of how to build it is not. That's because of two things. First of all, we see standards in the brick sizes and the structural organization, everything else matching with some archetypes from lowland cities. And so our guess is, my best guess right now, again, we still have a lot, maybe petrography can help us sort some of this, but there's another issue of stylistic, like architectural knowledge, right? I think that these folks, if they are indeed highland Turks who are used to living in yurts and not necessarily building cities, they rely on lowland Sogdian architects that they commission to come up to the site and build out of local material. And part of the evidence for that, I think, is the fact that these two mounds, I didn't show you the results of the 2024 season, although Sanjyot showed that building with the honeycomb, the kind of repeated room styles. Those two buildings are very similar in architectural layout, but technologically, they're totally different. Almost as if you had an architect in one and another architect in another who weren't talking to one another, except for to say we want the buildings to look like this. But one built it out of mud brick, compressed brick, and one built it out of like rammed earth, like proper brickless rammed earth. So the technologies across the site do suggest some borrowed expertise, or at least commissioned expertise. But I think from a materials perspective, there's so much sediment there all around that I think almost all the material that's available is local.
Cool. So that was my comment, my question, and now my invitation is that our group does a seminar next semester on Adobe. I don't know if Albert Gonzalez is online here, but I was thinking, why don't you, if you have those tools and you're thinking about how rammed earth bricks are created, we'd have space and ability to do that with you if you wanted to play around with different constituencies or constituent parts of the matrix and those bricks and start ramming it and trying different loading regimes. So an invitation to your team to come play with us in mud, man. All right.
I love it. Yeah. We'll talk. We'll hook up offline, because there's also one of your colleagues, Sanjyot can say more about this, but who's actually specifically an expert in the engineering of pāksa. He's an Uzbek professor at Berkeley, but he's of Uzbek background, and he collaborates with us a little bit. Has begun collaborating with us on the technology of pāksa, mostly from a heritage maintenance perspective. But I think that there's a lot of space here for us to look at the actual technology of the architecture. And
He actually took some cores.
What's that?
He did take some cores.
He did, yeah. There were some cores taken. So there's actually some samples already, I think, in Berkeley.
Yeah, he's in civil engineering.
Civil engineering. Yeah, he runs the
Yeah.
lab.
Yeah.
There's a question. There's a question from Clara Wright in the Zoom. Can we hope to see the ethnographic work with current local metal workers published in the near future?
Probably not, only because it wasn't systematic enough. Like it was really it was mostly because we had National Geographic out with us in 2018. And we wanted to enliven the story of these metallurgists creating these, deep time crafts in Uzbekistan. So it was more of a public scholarship thing. We didn't do systematic surveys or talk, it was very kind of ad hoc. So there's not really like a strict publishable data set there, but from an informative corpus of information, just seeing how people do metallurgy today and the steps and the whole process and looking at their toolkits and everything else was really informative. So unfortunately, like I said, it wasn't a project that was formally organized. It was just kind of like going around and talking with a lot of craftspeople, from ceramicists to metallurgists to weavers to kind of anybody who we could get a hold of in the modern context who does this craft to understand really what goes into their craft work. It does lend itself though to the opportunity. And so again, speaking of opportunities for students, you know, an awesome project would be for a student with the right language skills and the right, you know, interest to come out to Uzbekistan and do the ethnography of craft. I mean, it's still alive and well. There's a lot of really, really well-trained people. They still build out of a lot of these same architectural materials. Traditional, you can go into a village in the mountains today and see architecture that looks all but the same as what we're digging up from over 1,000 years ago.
And going back to the ceramics, next year we'll have, you know, the Central Asian specialist on ceramics join us.
Yeah.
So that's going to make a big difference too. Yeah.
Find those clay sources.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.